Hello everyone. Okay then, I hope we're all well and happy. Okay then, so what we're going to look at today is repression under the Tsars and communists. Again, this would be the third section, you pardon the pun, for essays, general essays on government. Okay. Now, what I asked you to do last lesson was to find out what means of repression communists and czars used, and you had that table which had on the main means. So you had like secret police, army, censorship, propaganda, etc., etc., and you had to give examples of the czars using those methods and the communists using those methods. I'm not going to go through each one in great detail because you should have done that for your own research and work. But you should be able to see great similarities between both types of regime, and you should have a range of examples for these as well, so you can pick out and cherry pick them from, the different rulers. So regarding the secret police, which is the first one, don't get too hung up about the name changes. The secret police seem to change their name every 2 minutes, and I can never remember myself which one is which. I know the KGB came at the end. I know the Cheka, I think, was under Lenin, he says. I know Alexander II inherited the third section, then I get a bit confused. So in an essay, if you can't remember whether it's the Cheka or the NKVD or whatever, just put the secret police under Khrushchev did, or the secret police under Alexander did. I think I'd rather you did that than you got the wrong one. Now, you should be able to give examples of the secret police being used under both regimes. They're used extensively by Lenin and Stalin, and Khrushchev as well, against opponents or perceived opponents. They're used extensively by the Tsars. Alexander III used the secret police to root out all those who have been involved in the assassination of Dadykins. Okay. The army, again, use of the army to suppress uprisings and revolts and all that kind of business. Again, there's plenty of examples under the Tsars and the communists. So just to give you some edited points now, Nicholas II used the army quite extensively after 1905 in order to restore law and order, especially in the countryside areas. The communists, again, would use the army from time to time to deal with opponents. So obviously you've got the Civil War under Lenin, where the army was used, or the Red Army was used to root out any opposition. And then I love this example under, well, I don't love it because it's a piece of repression, but under Khrushchev, you have the Novocherkassk uprising of 1962. You pronounce, well, I don't know how you pronounce it. You spell the name of the town Novocherkasssek. It was basically prices of food had gone up in 1962. This was a town, it's near the Ukraine, it's kind of above the Caucasus, where they all had banners saying Lenin wouldn't do this and we love Lenin and stuff. And Khrushchev responded by sending the army in. Officially, 22 people were killed, and it was kept a state secret as well. It only really came out following the end of the Soviet Union. And there's a picture of Putin laying a wreath at the memorial. So even Khrushchev would use the army if he needed to. So there's a nice Khrushchev example there of repression. People tend to always go about Stalin and Lenin because they're kind of quite excited with their repression. But it's quite nice to get a Khrushchev one in, if we can say that's quite a nice thing. Censorship, again, all Russian rulers use censorship in order to suppress opposition. So we know sometimes it was relaxed a little bit. So Alexander II and Khrushchev relaxed censorship, control of the press. Although, as we know, Alexander II then kind of put the screws back on again following that failed assassination attempt. Khrushchev, there was relaxation of censorship, and they became acceptable to criticize Stalin. However, there was still censorship against things that criticized like the Soviet system, and treatment of the revolution was treated very carefully. So if you wanted to write a book where you criticised, the Soviet Union and Bolshevism and stuff, then that was a no-no. But if you wrote something saying how horrible Stalin was and he smelt and everything, then that was fine. So relaxation of censorship was kind of done under kind of strict circumstances, if that's not a contradiction in terms, and all the Russian rulers used censorship in order to portray a certain image and a certain kind of preventing opposition from getting their material out. We're just linking to propaganda because, again, they all use propaganda. It was probably a bit more subtle under the Tsars because obviously they had that divine right, didn't they? So I must be a bit careful, but I suppose you could say the Orthodox Church almost spread the views of the Tsars, didn't they? Attended a church service because they're that closely linked. But things like, like have the royal family today in Britain, I don't think they quite have commemorative mugs for the coronation and stuff, but with that type of thing. So again, they used some of those. I think didn't Nicholas II as well celebrating, I want to say 400 years of Romanov rule in 1912, something like that. He went on like a tour of Russia, showing his crown and jewels and all the rest of it. So again, there's all that type of propaganda which you get with monarchy. Under the communists, it was a bit more kind of blatant, I suppose. And you had that cult of personality that really developed under Stalin in particular, and to some extent under Lenin. And they portrayed arts in certain ways. Soviet realism, it's called. You had to portray kind of the Soviet system, Russians as being good and honourable, etc., etc. Interestingly, the Tsars were not allowed to be mentioned under Lenin or under Stalin. So when you talk about like Russian past, you couldn't and celebrating Russian things in the past, you couldn't talk about Tsarist victories. But during the Second World War, Stalin then suddenly adopted Peter the Great and Ivan the Terrible, these kind of great Russian kind of previous rulers, and became much more nationalistic regarding that. So just thought I'd throw that in for you. When we look at Khrushchev in detail and the interpretation bit, we'll do a bit more about how he used these and certain things and his views on modern art, which are quite interesting. He said a bit of a naughty word, which we will do when we do Khrushchev. Okay, reform to appease and subsequently repress. So again, we've got examples of this under Alexander II and under Khrushchev in particular. I kind of already discussed those to some extent. And Russification. Again, we'll do a lot more on Russification when we do about nationalities later on in the course. This idea of trying to make all Russians in the empire into Russians. So trying to get rid of like different languages across the empire, different religions, etc., etc. And there's quite a lot of examples of this. So under the Tsars, you have Alexander III who uses Russification, especially in the East. Alexander II to some extent as well. Think about what the reaction to the Polish uprising, where he uses the army, or that fits into the later books or the earlier books. How again they try to suppress the Catholic Church and the Polish language and things like that in Poland. And again, the communists did the same as well. So think about in the Eastern Bloc, once Stalin after the Second World War captured, Hungary and Czechoslovakia and Poland and all those countries, they all had to adopt the Soviet model of government. The Russian language was the official language that was used for official documents and stuff like that. So Russification was used by communists and by Tsarist rulers. Now, these judgment questions, there's no right or wrong answer, it's up to you. So you have to decide yourself what was the most consistent form of repression. You might think there's more than one for that one. And say why, so I don't just write down, I think it's this. Okay, I want to know and why. Did one method change more over time than others? So was one method used more by one group and less by another group? Which one do you think was most effective at preventing opposition? So not dealing with opposition, but preventing it, stopping it writing in the first place. And did any of these methods backfire on any Russian rulers and it led to more problems than it solved? So that's what you need to do, or you should have done that really. Okay, this next bit doesn't seem very much work really for a whole lesson, but anyway, so I shall be nice to you. This next bit is the use of terror, and there's 3 real examples of terror being used really extensively. Probably the most extreme examples of it being used. And again, think about similarities between these 3 examples and or differences, because again, that's the type of thing you need to get into these paragraphs and stuff, isn't it? So we've got 1905 revolution, so that kind of attempted deposition of Nicholas II in 1905 is his reaction to that. I suggest if you look on Moodle, there's a book on there called, is it called Cohen and Fine? I can't remember what it's called. It's called Nicholas II Terror, and it talks about the consequences of the 1905 revolution. He was quite brutal towards opponents, so that's worth reading in order to get information for that. You've then got Lenin's Terror using Murphy and Morris and Evans and Jenkins, and you've got Stalin's Purges. Again, Evans and Jenkins is on there. I couldn't see on Moodle where the Evans and Jenkins bit was for those bits. So what I'll do, I'll take a photo of those pages on my tablety thing, and I'll add it onto the email. It might end up having to be 2 emails because it might be too big to put onto one. So you can use that as your basis, and then you can find these other books. If they're not on, don't worry about it. In order to get some details about what Lenin got up to and Stalin got up to. That video on Stalin, which I suggested you had a look at, again, make sure you watch it because that's very good. I'm about to sneeze on Stalin's. Very good on Stalin's terror and purges and all that kind of stuff, especially in the 1930s. Okay, so that's a bit of a blood-soaked kind of work for you. There's not a huge amount there, actually, so I am being rather nice to you. And then there's 4 judgment questions, which you need to do as well, so I can leave you to that. What we'll do on Thursday is that we'll look at opposition groups, and my plan is to try by next week, so next Monday, that's to finish off all the opposition stuff, and then you can crack on with your coursework. That said, Liz has realised that we might be a little bit behind where we would normally be on this, so we might meet a little bit the economy stuff, the next topic, kind of through June and over the holidays. Basically, it'll need to be done by the first lesson back, so like 1st of September or something. So I'll give you some more details on that. I'll also give you, I'll contact you also about coursework and what we expect and things of that nature. Okay, so for Thursday, when I do my next video, make sure you get these 3 areas of use of terror sorted. And then on Thursday, I'll talk about opposition groups and all that kind of stuff. Make sure you carry on with your coursework, and I will speak to you in the near future.